5 minutes is a lifetime. I was fortunate to get a week off from work because Isaac is going to be taking a month off to go and travel. It was a nice recharge before I started working more to cover for Isaac. He has adopted the role of the night guard dad since Eli retired, a role that suited Eli perfectly, and Isaac equally as well. Before Isaac sets off on his taste of retirement, we have a couple of shifts together so I can learn some of the responsibilities he usually handles. Kyle knows how to do it, but has proven to push off the minutiae of paperwork onto more tech-savvy people. His level of tech know-how involves connecting his phone to Bluetooth speakers to play highly inappropriate music in social situations. When he was a kid, he played Trap Queen and Black and Yellow at a funeral and nearly got throttled by some very angry attendees. There is very little crime in my small town, other than trespassing into cemeteries at night. It is one of the small blessings that can come with small town life. When trouble rolls into town, it is usually quickly identified and the trouble is chased out, or the trouble is converted to a member of the town. Working in the cemetery as a night guard, I miss a lot of the nightlife of the town. Because of this, I usually miss out on open mic at Charlie's Tavern, Holly's Pinball and Poker Night at Beer Barn, and my biggest missed opportunity is Andrew's Buffalo Wing Eat-Off, which always seems to fall on nights I have to do work, something I have been practicing for throughout my 20s, long before hearing about it a few years ago. Isaac and I spent a quiet night, checking the gates, listening to stories, and playing checkers with Captain Ike, picking pieces of charred flesh off of his body and flicking them at the board in annoyed boredom when he stopped mid-flick and scurried off towards the fountain. I gave Isaac a look of if we should follow him, and he jumped over my last piece and ushered me to lead the way. As we neared the fountain, we didn't see any spirits or trace of living intruders and split off to see what was wrong. Bruiser hadn't earned an honest dollar since he was 12. His parents told him that if he wanted that new bike, he was going to have to earn it with his own money. Bruiser decided that he would sell his Pokemon cards and unopened packs to the neighborhood kids to try and earn the money. His collection lightened and an extra $200 in his pocket. He learned kids could pay top dollar for rare cards, and most importantly, unopened packs. He knew the best place to swipe packs of cards was at Mr. Jenkins' pharmacy. Mr. Jenkins was a dirty old man that liked to peek down at the loose blouses of women that needed prescriptions filled, and while he was busy getting a nightful, the cards were left unguarded long enough for Bruiser to stack a dozen or two packs into his underwear before buying a moon pie and RC Cola to avoid future unwanted attention. With careful fingers and plenty of superglue, Bruiser would open the packs and take out the good cards and reseal the packs with commons. This was the start of a series of scams that Bruiser would run. By the time he was in high school, he had expanded from running scams to full-on bullying the smaller students. The one thing everyone could agree on about Bruiser was that he was a big boy that was smarter than his oafish size made him appear. His two yes men, Needles and Belch, always followed in lockstep to his every hustle and late night B&E, and they always managed to just avoid detection. From a malfunctioning security camera to the residents of a household spending the weekend out of town, the town blessed him with little miracles. That was until another 17-year-old boy in his class brought up the midnight run. Bruiser, never the coward, snuck into the cemetery with a worried Belch and terrified Needles. While in the cemetery, they remained quiet despite the many spirits lurking the grounds, likely due to the fear that caused the three to all fill their jockeys full of shit. Then, when a sly regent told them about a precious heirloom inside his family's mausoleum, Bruiser led his cronies to the mausoleum to break in for what they were told was worth millions. When the night guard spotted them trying to break the lock of the mausoleum, it was by sheer dumb luck that Belch and Needles were able to drag Bruiser away from the stashed treasure and escape the cemetery. Full of rage at being forced to abandon his treasure, Bruiser beat Belch and Needles to two bloody husks when they finally stopped outside of Mr. Jenkins' pharmacy. This time, there was no malfunction with the cameras and no way for Bruiser to avoid the consequences that had eluded him for 5 years. Needles, who was forever known after the incident as Stammering Stan, who had suffered a brain bleed and was never able to talk without stuttering through every word, Belch had been mockingly called Wobbling Walter, as his broken leg had left him with a permanent limp and the head trauma that had diminished his speech with monosyllabic words. For his part in the brutality, Bruiser found himself in a state penitentiary for 30 years. Locked up, Bruiser, who had always been a big boy pushing around those smaller and weaker than him, had a chance to know what it was to have someone bigger and meaner than him tell him what to do. Despite the time locked up, Bruiser never forgot about that secret treasure stashed away in the Regent family mausoleum. 30 years after his potential millions slipped through his fingers, he returned to the cemetery to claim what he believed was rightfully his. I had walked south from the fountain as Isaac went north. We had done our last gate check at 5 a.m., so all that would be left was to unlock the gates at 6. Seeing no one, I began to make my way to the south gates when Mad Michael appeared before me and told me to follow him to Isaac. No one was going to keep Bruiser from his treasure, not the shitheads he called friends when he was 17, not some old night guard shining a flashlight at him with a confused look on his face. Mad Michael floated ahead of me while I ran towards the sound of angry screaming coming from the Regent mausoleum. Something was wrong. The voice did not sound like Isaac, but it didn't sound like the screaming of the spirits either. If some old fuck thought he was going to get his wrinkly hands on Bruiser's treasure, he had another thing coming. Bruiser tightened his grip on the crowbar and lifted it above his head. The startled guard dropped his flashlight to the ground and lifted his hands above his head. Fire burned in my lungs as my feet pushed off the asphalt road. My hands clenched around my flashlight, panic flooding over my body. The crowbar came down with a cushioned thunk off the old man's head, dropping him to the ground with a solid blow. 30 years of fighting off bigger brutes and many times failing to fight them off had hardened his muscles. The next swing broke the lock of the mausoleum, allowing the gates to swing open. Regent and Captain Ike smiled wide as Bruiser stepped inside the mausoleum. There, I found the source of the screaming. A demented man was screaming in rage inside of an empty mausoleum as Regent and Captain Ike tore his body apart. The man's eyes locked on mine as the burning antlers split his belly open. Empty. Nothing but long since buried bodies with nothing of value inside. The sight made Bruiser scream out in a rage as flurry of slurs and curses spilled from his mouth as Regent wrapped his rope around Bruiser's neck. I carried Isaac to the north gate, hoping beyond hope that there was still time to help him. I glanced at my watch and saw the time. 5:55 a.m. Still wasn't time to unlock the gate. A congregation of spirits encircled around me, encouraging me to unlock the gate and save my friend. There might still be time to rush him to the hospital, but waiting wasn't going to help him. 5:56 a.m. Tears washed from my eyes as I looked down at Isaac. I began to reach for my keys when his hand lifted up and fell onto my hand, gripping the keys. He gave a weak shake of his head back and forth. The cheering to unlock the gates grew louder. 5:57 a.m. I gripped the keys harder, feeling the metal dig into my palm as the frustration whitened the knuckles of my fist. Isaac's soft grip began to loosen before I let go of the keys and gently squeezed his hand. Thousands of voices told me that if I didn't hurry, Isaac was surely going to die. 5:58 a.m. Isaac looked at me with glossy eyes, the light fading from them as he gave a weak smile. Waves of muttering about my failure to protect my friend echoed in my ears, jeering and hissing comments about my cowardice, about letting someone die despite being able to unlock the gate and rush to help. 5:59 a.m. You have to unlock the gate. Every second counts, and you're wasting minutes. 5:59:13 a.m. We get another victim of the cemetery, and we didn't even have to kill him ourselves. 5:59:27 a.m. You might as well tell him goodbye now, that way you can join him in death. 5:59:41 a.m. Can you believe someone snuck in here just to kill a worthless night guard? If it was that easy, I would have told more of those kids to do it. The roaring voices deafening all around me. 5:59 a.m. I'm so proud of you, Isaac whispered, his breath labored and exhausted. His eyes rolled back as the words left his mouth while the voices screamed all around. 6 a.m. Silence. I slammed the key into the gate and threw it open. I lifted Isaac to my car and dropped the seat back before rushing to the driver's side. I slid off, making brief eye contact with the cemetery director. Words were not needed. 6:02 a.m. My car screeched onto the main road and I ran a red light, nearly getting sideswiped by a BMW. My foot slammed on the gas pedal as I raced towards a glimmer of hope. 6:06 a.m. I jumped the curb and nearly avoided getting hit by a parked ambulance. I jumped from the car and almost forgetting to put it in park. I cleared the hood of my car and threw the passenger door open, lifting Isaac up with the last of my adrenaline-fueled strength. 6:08 a.m. I watched the nurses rush Isaac off, their faces grim with doubt. 11:10 a.m. I sat in the waiting room with bated breaths, a prayer to a god I stopped believing in decades ago. Kyle, Thomas, Jacob, and the cemetery director all around me making their own prayers for Isaac. 1:03 p.m. The doctor approached us, face sunken, with hands nervously fiddling with each other. Isaac had died. The blow with a crowbar had proved fatal. They did everything they could, but he had been brain dead before I'd arrived at the hospital. There was nothing that I could have done. If only I'd gotten there a few minutes earlier, he might have survived. But in the end, Isaac wouldn't let me unlock the gates early. Because in the end, the voices inside won out. Not everything inside is trying to kill me. Isaac's grandson, Joseph, came to the funeral that was held. As per his wishes, Isaac was cremated and strictly forbidden from being returned to the cemetery. At the wake, the other guards and myself all shared stories of how great Isaac had been. I spoke of how kind and caring he was and how I viewed him as a father figure and how he saved my life. Joseph told us that he didn't know his grandfather very well. His mother had died when he was a small kid, and her side of the family and where they come from had always been a mystery to him. Eli pulled Joseph to the side and told him that his grandfather wanted to see the world again, and that it would be a great honor for his grandson to be the one to show him that world. With a nod, Joseph said he understood, and as soon as he finished school, he would make sure to take him wherever he went. The life of a photographer sure sounds like an adventurous one. Peaceful, surely an afterlife worth seeing. Traveling to strange and exotic sights to see the beauty of the world. Kyle and I meandered away from the church, stopping by the old oak outside of the cemetery. I don't remember seeing Kyle pick up an axe, and I don't remember how long it took us, but by 8 that night, the old oak fell into the street and removed the ease of access into the cemetery. Now, if the lambs wished to offer themselves for slaughter, they would need to get a little more creative with getting in. Eli had made a small return from retirement to help with the cemetery director search for more candidates for night guard. While it was only once a week, and always the same nights that worked, it was nice having a familiar face there with me. Brian, known as Bruiser by the people who had the misfortune of meeting him, was found in the Regent family mausoleum, bisected from the belly down. When the cemetery director found him, he was coughing blood and muttering about treasure and his birthright and how he was lied to. The director picked up the bloody crowbar and sent the miserable wretch to his eternal fate before rushing to the hospital, making phone calls to everyone in his contact list. Brian had barely survived the shadows that had lured him into the cemetery until after they had scattered into the light of day. I doubt he would be able to return like the contractor had. During the day, the cemetery is like any other cemetery you come across. A quiet place full of dead people, with people shedding tears and moments of silence for someone who cannot hear them. At night, like every night, the grounds are filled with hustle and bustle of the departed. 2 night guards lock the gates and check them every hour until the morning, told stories or threatened by voices that echo in the night. After I refuse to open the gate, even to save my dying friend, many of the spirits have chosen to avoid me. If I am willing to let someone close to me suffer rather than open the gates a few minutes early, there is nothing they could say that would convince me to free them. Even Mrs. McCarthy is elected to distance herself from me. Her intentions seem to have been a slow build-up of friendship to convince me to let her out. The only one who still pops by is Mad Michael, surely proving how mad he really is. Shortly after 3 a.m., I sat by the fountain and started flipping pennies into the upper bowl, missing far more than actually getting anything in, when Mad Michael sat down next to me and hovered a hand over my shoulder. "Do you know why I am called Mad Michael?" the voice said, waiting for the shake of my head. My head turned left to right as the penny I flipped bounced off of Phoebe's face and onto the foot of his brother. "When I was alive, I told the people of my small town that a demon lived among us. It would bless the people with good luck as long as they made sacrifices to him. The people of the town scoffed at my foolishness. The mayor, like any good patriot, was recruiting young men to go off and fight the British. The British were sore from losing their most valued colony and wanted to take it back." I set the sack of pennies I was holding down and turned to face Michael as if I had never heard him talk about being alive. "When I would argue that the boys the mayor recruited never returned, not a single one, I was chastised for my youthful ignorance of war. What could a 13-year-old boy know about the reality of war?" Michael gazed up at the fountain with a look of disapproval before turning back to me, fully engaged in his story. "Back then, there were no gates to the cemetery. A caretaker, who lived where your admin building is now, would chase out rambunctious kids that thought running through a cemetery at night was a jovial time, but hardly a night watchman. Late into the night, long after the rest of the town had been taken by sleep, I would see the mayor leading a pack of young men through the cemetery, and an hour later, he would return alone." I stared at Michael, surprised at how long he had lived. Michael paused in deep thought, remembering something he wished had been lost to time. "One night, I snuck into the cemetery and climbed an old yew tree that stood where this fountain stands now. From my viewpoint, I saw the mayor do horrific things to the young men he led inside, before wiping the blood from his mouth and returning to town. The sight had frozen me in terror, and I was unable to move until the early morning light. When I finally regained control of my body, I fell from the tree and twisted my leg, an injury that left me lame for the rest of my life." Michael gestured to his legs, which had a bent in it I had never noticed before. I, of course, continued to condemn the mayor, and continued to be called mad and daft for my accusations. After the war, and after Napoleon had been kicked out of France, a group of Germans arrived in our small town, bringing their faith with them. When they announced their plans to build a Lutheran church, the mayor had been the loudest to decry the heretical beliefs of the influx of immigrants. However, the town decided that the addition of a house of worship would be beneficial to the spirit of the town. While I could not help with the building, I was recruited to work on a series of intricate clocks and ornaments to be included in the structure, something I took to naturally, and gained the praise from the Germanic implants to our town. Michael wiggled his fingers and mimed the minute craftsmanship, required for his profession. As I told my new audience the concerns I had for the town mayor, of his pagan practices and strange pull on the town, I was heard for the first time with unfettered belief. Late one night, a group of the men helped me enter the cemetery, keeping our distance as the mayor led a few of our newest residents toward the old yew tree. When they witnessed the act of barbarism committed by the mayor, they acted instinctively. They rushed the mayor and nailed him to the yew tree before burning both to ashes. Michael stood up and I glanced at my watch. It was nearly time for the next gate check. I walked towards the south gates as Michael continued his story. After the mayor's death, the town was plagued by a typhus outbreak. Fearing the turn of luck, the town fenced in the cemetery, putting the 2 gates that stand to this day. Once the gates were locked that night, the fortunes of the town began to turn. The town chose a series of men to watch over the cemetery at night, making sure it was locked at 9 every night, and remained locked every hour until 6 in the morning. I locked the gates and watched as Michael waved off a few shadows, dripping water and sludges of green sludge. As the shadows returned to the darkness, Michael resumed talking. It was a matter of pride to stand watch over the cemetery. Back then, there was only one spirit that roamed the cemetery, the mayor, bound in chains and in a constant state of fire, would howl through the nights, but never left the place of his death. One night, despite the protests of the town, I stood guard. There were probably 6 or 7 men at night prowling the grounds, checking the gate, as I sat on the downed tree, massaging my leg, and I felt a sudden bash to the back of my head. My vision blurred and I cried out in pain for help. Michael rubbed the back of his head as he spoke. We walked by a disheveled Callahan who picked at boils spotting over his body. Professor Joel was consoling him and telling him that picking at the boils was only going to make it worse. When I rolled to my side, I looked up and saw the mayor standing above me, fury in his eyes as he brought down his fists onto my face. When I awoke, I was standing over my body as it was consumed by the starving mayor. I was trapped in the cemetery with him. I made the assumption that speaking in the cemetery, when the gates were closed, allowed for the spirits to be able to interact with living beings. I ran a few tests to prove my assumption, and from then on, I warned those who stood guard every night to remain silent. Over time, more and more spirits arrived, most from places I do not know. I stood in disbelief. Mad Michael, who had been here for so long, it was he who was a guardian angel in a den of demons. One man who tried to do the right thing was bound to the cemetery for centuries. As time passed, the other spirits learned of my lack of malice and shunned me, calling me mad just as I was called when I was alive. The name Mad Michael stuck. I wish I could tell you how to change things here, but I simply don't know. The mayor had slowly become the cemetery. In a way, I think he has become the whole town. His gift of good fortune lives on as long as his sacrifices are made. Is it worth the cost? After asking his question, Michael disappeared into the night, leaving me to digest everything he had told me. I had more questions, but no way to ask, at least for now. I now have an angel watching over me in the cemetery, an angel named Michael.